Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Blankenship, and my final for citizen leadership is based on the CNN documentary Blackfish. So, just what is Blackfish? Well, Blackfish is a 2013 documentary surrounding the three deaths that occurred because of an orca belonging to SeaWorld named Tilikum. The film aimed to tackle SeaWorld's history and how their practices contributed to a cycle of violence that was then passed down to their orcas, which led to this tragedy to begin with. The film tackled how SeaWorld captures baby orcas with speedboats and nets and take young from their families. Blackfish also talks extensively about David Duke's death and how the media shied away from coverage, likely because he was homeless and mentally ill, and how SeaWorld portrayed him as a ruffian and a vagrant. Blackfish is also about animal activism and how we commodify animals for human entertainment and profit. The film is ultimately a call to action for the audience to stand up for those who do not have a voice. Blackfish mainly revolves around 6 individuals. The main players within the film are, of course, the producers, as it was produced by Sandem Films, the director, Gabriella Cowperthwaite, the 3 people Tilikum killed, but most notably is trainer Don Branchow, of course, the whale, Tilikum, who is a male orca, the company, who is SeaWorld. The focus is, of course, about the long-term abuse that he suffered there, and finally, the audience is also an important member of Blackfish. The film is about allowing you to somewhat become the voice for the orcas. So, why did I end up choosing Blackfish for my final? Well, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Jaws. Yes, I was the kid buying all of the shark fact books at the school book fair, and I was the kid who collected shark teeth like they were some lost eighth wonder of the world. I think I was amazed that the ocean was such a large and vast place that it felt like when I looked at it, it was like I was looking into a second universe. One year when I was 8, I had even written on my Santa Claus wish list if I could bring Jaws home and have him live in my pool. I could make him better, I wrote on that, assuming that I could make the killer shark change his ways. Naturally, this very early shark obsession led my parents to sit me down during a special Jaws marathon to watch the film Blackfish. I then very soon learned the cost of captivity. Part of the reason that I feel that Blackfish is so important is that we have no ethical reasons as a society to capture animals like this, isolate them, and force them to perform for audiences. Orca whales are large creatures that deserve and belong to their home in the ocean. While I understand that sometimes human intervention is necessary, like I think of the Wild Eagle Sanctuary in Dollywood for the bald eagles who can no longer fly, we have a responsibility to let nature be nature and return the orcas back to their home. The separation of orcas from their parents is not a natural phenomenon and likely leads to them to be aggressive and hostile as they age and grow older. While I am not in the animal health or conservation field, I still feel very strongly about this issue and making sure that captured animals can one day return home and that we can stop animal exploitation for good. The main focus of the film Blackfish was centered around the tragedy of Tilikum, a male orca whale at SeaWorld. Tilikum, who was known to be abused by the other whales at SeaWorld, often this was thought to be the cause of his aggression. Tilikum was also kept in isolation in a square pen right outside of the park, which was 20 feet by 20 feet and was only 30 feet deep. Even before Tilikum took the lives of the 3 people mentioned, he was also known as a prior aggressor. This was likely due to his capture in Iceland at only 2 years old. In the wild, orca calves often stay with their mothers for most of its life. However, in Tilikum's case, it was taken away from its mother at just 2. This natural disruption was often seen as what caused Tilikum to be so violent. Another large part of the film Blackfish was, of course, the 3 victims. The first of which was Kelty Lee Brent, who was a 20-year-old student in Canada who worked at the SeaWorld in British Columbia. She was a known swimmer and worked there to gain some extra cash to help pay her way through college. One day, during her shift, she had slipped and fell into the whale pool. Witnesses recalled that she had screamed in panic after realizing that one of the whales, Tilikum, was holding her foot and dragging her down underwater. The second death was that of Daniel P. Dukes, who was a 27-year-old man from South Carolina. Shortly after this incident, SeaWorld had claimed that Dukes was a vagrant who climbed into Tilikum's pool and drowned. However, the coroner's report and animal advocates for Tilikum have pointed out that Dukes' corpse was found severely mutilated by the whale. Dukes was generally regarded by the media as a trespasser and nuisance rather than a direct victim of Tilikum, although this perception has been changed due to the release of Blackfish. In fact, the 2013 documentary was the first media to actually explore Duke's death extensively. The lack of early coverage of his death later became noted for the way the media and investigators handled the deaths of the homeless and the mentally ill, in particular, expressing the often lack of dignity which is applied to such cases. The third death contributed to Tilikum, of course, was the February 24th, 2010 Dawn Branchow killing. Dawn was killed following a Dine with Shamu show. She was a veteran trainer who was rubbing Tilikum as part of a post-show routine when the orca grabbed her and pulled her into the water. SeaWorld stated that Tilikum grabbed her ponytail, although some witnesses reported seeing him grab her by the arm or shoulder. He scalped her, then bit off her arm during the attack. Branchow's autopsy indicated death by drowning and blunt force trauma. It was her death and the media coverage that followed that inspired the documentary Blackfish to be written, filmed, and produced. So, what happened exactly after Blackfish aired on the TV? And just what was its effect on the industry? The message of Blackfish was a simple one. We need to end the animal entertainment industry, or at the very least, treat animals with the care and respect they deserved. So, what exactly changed at SeaWorld after the film? As of around 2016, SeaWorld did stop entertainment-based shows and changed to educational ones, going over how orcas behave in the wild. In 2016, they also stopped their orca breeding program, meaning that the generation of orcas that are currently at SeaWorld will be the last. SeaWorld has also increased its focus on animal well-being and care. It has a full-time staff of veterinarians and a 24-hour hotline for rescuing stranded sea creatures. While the message of Blackfish is clear, there are some potential challenges as to how we change the industry for good. Many people and companies still use harmful rhetoric, like killer whales, to continue to demonize these orcas. By giving them a title like this, many people may not see freeing them as a quote-unquote good thing. Animal exploitation is also a booming multi-million-dollar industry. There is too much money to be lost if it were to cease too quickly, and donors wouldn't like that very much. There is also a lack of education present to where many people aren't aware of the issues surrounding animal exploitation and thus don't see it as any sort of harm. Because we regard zoos and aquariums as places such as cool or fun to be, we are unable to see these animals going back to nature because we would lose our own form of entertainment. Of course, this is harmful to the animals, and one way to help address this issue is to educate. One of the main issues, of course, is animal entertainment. In Huggins' Colonialism Culture Whales, the Cetacean Quartet, he argues that because we view ourselves as greater beings than animals, we can see orca whales as something to be owned and exploited. This article provided great context for me as to why it took a tragedy in order for SeaWorld to change. After all, they were in a position to view the orca as less than, which led to their exploitation being looked over. It even explains that even though there were instances of violence during orca shows, many of the audience didn't seem to realize or care that the orcas were isolated or frustrated because of performing. Of course, after the release of Blackfish, SeaWorld was met with an immediate firestorm on social media. In Woods' article, he breaks down exactly what occurred on Twitter. SeaWorld had led a failed campaign at #AskSeaWorld, where SeaWorld would respond to people's Twitter posts explaining that the documentary was propaganda and that they should visit their website, which is now defunct, AskSeaWorld.com. For me, this article provided a lot of insight of just what kind of company SeaWorld really was in the height of the 2013-2014 Blackfish documentary. Here are some of the tweets that were very popular on Twitter at the time of the documentary's release. Michael Tucker had asked, if you were a killer whale, would you rather live in the ocean with your family or in one of your tanks alone? Hashtag Ask SeaWorld. SeaWorld had also had to deactivate the official Shamu account and said at this difficult time, as Shamu will not be active. And finally, my favorite Twitter exchange was SeaWorld had posted, learn the truth about our killer whale care. Blackfish is animal rights propaganda. And Tom Ryan had responded and said, at SeaWorld, your tweets are propaganda. Your former trainers have spoken out against your barbaric practices. The world knows the truth. Finally, one of my favorite parts about the film is just how exactly do you frame a crisis. Besides being known as an emerging animal rights film, Blackfish is also known as a well-crafted documentary. In Waller's article, he discusses how when we're framing a crisis, it's important that the message doesn't get lost. Because of this, Blackfish does an excellent job at presenting the information effectively, so the viewer is then in turn able to care about the issue. This provided me with a lot of insight because it wasn't until I really thought about how Blackfish was actually crafted and how I was able to receive the information that I was like, oh, I actually really care about this issue and I want to learn how I can help stand up for the orca whales. So, how does Blackfish translate to the social change leadership model? First, let's look at individual values. One of the key individual values is the consciousness of self presented within the film. They achieve this by having trainers such as John Hargrove acknowledge their strengths, such as their passion for animals, but also confront the moral and professional weakness of working in such an exploitative industry. This self-awareness allows them to navigate the complex ethical environment presented within Blackfish and SeaWorld as a whole. Another important individual value presented within the film Blackfish is the idea of commitment. I think that from the director of the documentary, she was very committed in telling the story and making it known. There is also a level of commitment now placed in the viewers of the documentary. The audience is now left to continue raising awareness for the issue and to continue their own commitment to fight for those who cannot. Now we have group values. One of the core group values within the film was controversy with civility. The film presents this by offering differing viewpoints about the orcas and their captivity. Even though the documentary is mostly about the harm SeaWorld has done, it did include viewpoints and interviews with current staff to voice their own opinions of the orcas in SeaWorld. The film also discusses common purpose by having a shared mission among the various groups, protecting the orcas and exposing the harmful practices of captivity. The film has both activists and former SeaWorld employees align their values with animal welfare and environmental sustainability, focusing their efforts on changing the public perceptions and corporate practices. And finally, we have community values. Of course, because of the way Blackfish is presented in the actual topic, the orcas are voiceless. In doing so, we as the audience become responsible for standing up for their rights. The practice of good citizenship includes acting on behalf of others, both human and non-human. The leadership aspect of good citizenship connects to the advocacy for the change inspired by the documentary. Activists, former trainers, and scientists featured within the documentary demonstrate leadership by raising awareness and about the consequences of orca captivity. Advocating for orca welfare, supporting conservation efforts, and spreading awareness of the ethical concerns align with the principles of working for positive change on behalf of others and the community. In conclusion, Blackfish is a film that inspires leadership within its viewers to help create the change the world needs. The film, while centering on SeaWorld and Tilikum the orca, is also a critique on the exploitive nature of how we treat animals and how it often takes a tragedy in order to strike change. The film provides an even broader narrative surrounding the capture of the orcas, their living environment, and a look at the 3 people who died at the fins of Tilikum, and even more broadly, SeaWorld. The film is ultimately about animal rights and speaking up for the voiceless. It is ultimately up to us now to continue to fight for animal rights and stop this issue from growing larger. I hope that I was able to either encourage you to watch Blackfish or to help join the fight to stand up for animal rights. And thank you for watching.